Here is something that your employer absolutely does not want you to know. The single most powerful financial move you can make in your career is to leave, not eventually, strategically, every 2 to 4 years. Because while your company is handing you a 3% cost of living raise and calling it a reward for your loyalty, the company down the street is advertising your exact job title with a salary 15% higher than what you currently make. That gap? That is not an accident. That is a policy. And once you truly understand how compensation works in corporate America, you will never think about your career the same way again. Let's break this down. When you stay at a company long-term, your salary grows through a mechanism called the annual performance review cycle. Sounds official. Sounds fair. In practice, most companies budget between 2.5% and 4% for annual merit increases across the board. Even if you are a top performer, the range your manager can typically offer you without jumping through extraordinary approval hoops is somewhere between 3% and 6%. If inflation is running at 3%, congratulations. You effectively got a 0% raise in real purchasing power. Now let's run the numbers. Say you start a job at $70,000 a year. With a generous 4% annual raise every single year, no bad reviews, no flat years, after 4 years you are earning roughly $82,000. That sounds decent. But here is where it gets interesting. Companies operate on two completely separate budgets when it comes to compensation. There is the internal compensation budget, which governs raises, and there is the external hiring budget, which governs what they offer candidates coming from outside. These two budgets are not connected. They are not even in the same conversation. The external hiring budget is almost always dramatically larger. Why? Because companies compete for external talent in a marketplace. They know that if they lowball a candidate, that person accepts another offer and disappears. There is urgency. There is competition. There is a real business cost attached to a failed hire. Industry estimates put the cost of replacing a salaried employee at somewhere between 50% and 200% of their annual salary when you factor in recruiting fees, lost productivity, and training time. So hiring managers are authorized to pay market rate or above to close the deal. Internal employees, on the other hand, are already there. They have obligations, projects in progress, relationships, a routine. The company knows this. HR knows this. And they know that most people will not quit over a 3% raise versus a 5% raise. They will grumble and they will stay. That dynamic is what keeps internal budgets small. The result is that the same company that will offer an external candidate $90,000 for a role will offer their existing employee, equally qualified, arguably more valuable because they already know the systems, $75,000 with a polite smile. This is not unusual. This is industry standard behavior. Let's play out two career trajectories for someone starting at $70,000 at age 25, heading into their late 30s. The first person, let us call them the loyal employee, stays at each company for 10 or more years and collects 3.5% raises annually. After 12 years, they are earning around $106,000. Solid. Respectable. The second person, the strategic mover, changes jobs every 3 years and negotiates a 15% salary increase each time they make a move. After the first jump at year 3, they are earning around $95,000. After the second jump at year 6, they clear about $109,000. After the third jump at year 9, they are at roughly $125,000. After the fourth jump at year 12, they are earning close to $144,000. That is a gap of nearly $38,000 per year in salary alone. Compounded over those 12 years, the cumulative difference in total earnings, just in take-home pay before you factor in equity, bonuses, or retirement contributions, is significant enough to change someone's financial life. We are talking about potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars in lifetime earnings divergence, all from the same starting point and the same level of effort. Beyond the pure salary math, strategic job hopping has a second, less discussed benefit. It forces accelerated skill development. When you stay in one environment long enough, you begin to optimize for that specific environment. You become deeply expert in how your company does things, which is valuable, but only to your company. Your market value, which is what actually determines your negotiating power, depends on breadth as much as depth. Every time you move to a new organization, you are exposed to different systems, different leadership styles, different ways of solving problems. You build adaptability. You build a cross-industry perspective. You build a network across multiple organizations rather than concentrating all your professional relationships in a single building. And when you go to negotiate your next salary, you are not just bringing years of experience. You are bringing a toolkit that other candidates who have spent their entire career in one place simply do not have. Hiring managers pay for that. Recruiters actively seek it out for senior roles. Now let's talk about the objections, because there are always objections. The first one is loyalty. This is the most common pushback, and it deserves a direct answer. Loyalty in the employment relationship is not a two-way street in the way that it was 50 years ago. The era of the company pension, the gold watch, and the guarantee of employment in exchange for decades of service ended somewhere around the 1980s and 1990s. Today, companies conduct layoffs based on quarterly earnings targets. They offshore entire departments. They eliminate roles during mergers with zero regard for tenure. Loyalty to a corporation as a financial strategy is not a virtue. It is a risk. The second objection is job security. Here is the counterintuitive truth. Someone who changes jobs every few years and builds skills across multiple organizations is actually more secure, not less. Their income does not depend on the survival of the single company. Their network is distributed. If they lose a job, they have more contacts, more recent interview experience, and a stronger market reputation to draw on. The person who has been at one company for 20 years and then faces a layoff at 52 is in a far more precarious position. The third objection is the resume. Won't a spotty resume hurt you? The stigma around job hopping has declined substantially, particularly after the pandemic, and particularly in fields like technology, finance, marketing, and professional services. 2 to 4 years at each role is not considered short-term anymore by most modern hiring managers, especially when each move represents a clear upward trajectory. What raises red flags is moving every 6 months or moving laterally with no apparent growth. Moving upward every few years reads as ambition and market value. So how do you do this right? Because strategic job hopping is not the same as impulsive job hopping. Done poorly, it leaves gaps in your resume, damages professional relationships, and gets you a reputation in a small industry as unreliable. Done well, it compounds like interest. The first rule is always leave on good terms. Serve out your notice period. Document your work. Train your replacement if there is time. The professional world is smaller than it looks, and the manager you leave gracefully today may be the hiring manager who takes your call 3 years from now. The second rule is to move towards something, not just away from something. Every move should come with a clear narrative. A bigger scope, a new market, a leadership opportunity, exposure to a different business model. You should be able to explain in a single sentence why you made each transition and what you gained from it. The third rule is to do your market research before you move. Use tools like LinkedIn Salary, Glassdoor, Levels.fyi for tech roles, and Bureau of Labor Statistics data to understand what your skills are actually worth in the current market. You cannot negotiate effectively from ignorance. Know your floor, know your target number, and do not be the first to name a figure in a negotiation if you can avoid it. The fourth rule is to never accept the first offer without exploring it. A company that makes you an offer expects some negotiation. Asking for 8% to 12% above the initial offer, with a clear rationale based on market data and your specific experience, is standard practice and almost never results in a rescinded offer. The upside of a successful negotiation is $5,000 to $15,000 in additional annual salary, which compounds through every future raise and every future offer. The most important thing to internalize is this: your employer is not managing your career. You are. The company will always optimize for its own interests. That is not cynicism. That is how businesses work, which means you need to optimize for yours with the same clarity and intention. Strategic job hopping is not about being disloyal or restless. It is about understanding the rules of the compensation market and playing by them instead of ignoring them. It is about recognizing that your labor has a market value and that you are entitled to capture it. The people earning the most in their fields in their 40s and 50s are almost never the ones who stayed in the same chair the longest. They are the ones who moved deliberately, learned aggressively, negotiated confidently, and understood early that in the modern American labor market, mobility is not a liability. It is the strategy,